everyone, my name is Ornella Hernandez and I'm your CryptoTV host. I'll be breaking down some of the latest news from the Web3 world. Today we're going to talk to a lawyer who's going to explain his latest case in crypto. And then we'll discover what is Onchain Summer. Let's get started. So I recently spoke to the author of a letter addressed to the Inspector General of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC. And the author's name is Matthew Bouillon. He's a senior counsel at the International Blockchain Legal LLP law firm, and the intended recipient was Deborah Jeffrey. This lawyer contacted the SEC on behalf of a client that is expecting to receive a payout from the regulator in connection to a defunct exchange called DeFi Money Market that the SEC shut down in 2021 due to registration violations. It's been 2 years, and the legal team estimates that $13 million are in the hands of the SEC, which it received in a settlement from the founders behind DeFi Money Market. Now, these $13 million came from investors who bought utility tokens and governance tokens from the platform. The problem, according to Matthew, is that the SEC is being very slow in distributing the money back to investors. He wonders how the SEC is going to go about giving back the money that they've taken in, and he wants the SEC to do a better job when it comes to protecting investors. His client prefers to remain anonymous, but we spoke to Matthew about why he thinks that there is a delay and about the efforts that him and his law firm are taking. Hey Matt, how are you? Thank you for joining me. I wanted to learn more about exactly what you are trying to achieve here.
Raise awareness and let the politicians know, the ones who are tasked with overseeing the federal government, let them know that this part of the federal government is not doing its job in a manner that serves its mandate, and that the public is taking notice of this, and there could be electoral consequences as a result of this. I mean, I was a securities regulator for some years, and what I can tell you is that none of these people are elected. So they already, from day one, they don't have the requisite chops, if you will. They don't have the backing of the public who voted them into office, co-signing these moves. Whereas the politicians, even though every system has problems, the politicians themselves, they do have that support, that democratic legitimacy. These bureaucrats do not, and we're tired of unelected people making these very important decisions. I don't think ultimately there's much more that we can do, but we're watching it closely, and we want everybody in the blockchain community and the industry to, set aside the turf wars, set aside the tribalism, move past this populist garbage that we have to deal with, stop the scamming. We need to police ourselves in a much more effective way. I'm engaged on that front by representing people who have been defrauded, and it's gutting to see that so much is still so wrong, and that so many people view this space as zero sum. We know it's a function of being early adopters, but it is a bit unnerving and kind of depressing in some sense, because we have had recent hacks of prominent DeFi protocols, and some of which I have been a participant, in the community, and it hurts. And we want to see a community where hackers think twice before doing that sort of thing. So it's a full scale kind of full court press type approach, and we're just taking it one day at a time. We have no control over Washington.
Okay, so what's unique about this case?
So this is a case involving a fair fund distribution, and this is all pretty straightforward. It's written down in statute and in regulations. How it basically deals with how the SEC is to go about giving back money that they've taken in as a result of in this case, it wasn't even a fraud, it was just registration violations. But often in fraud, you see these types of scenarios, and it makes sense. You want to have a procedure to redistribute money to aggrieved investors. And so There are normally two tracks that these cases can take. The first is the just a compromise, a settlement that remains administrative in nature. And then there are occasionally these cases that are litigated where a judge is overseeing the distribution because it happens to be in court. And we're in the first track in this one. When the order was entered, it was already well planned out because lawyers talk about this stuff back and forth before an order is agreed to. This means that the SEC would have known pretty early that there was money to be returned, and they would have had a more or less a rough timeline for when those funds would need to be returned and when they would have arrived. And in this case, we think that happened early on in the process. And so there's no court overseeing it. It's just the Commission, the Division of Enforcement, and the Office of Distributions. And, we think this is a pretty cozy arrangement they've got going where, administratively, there's nobody outside the SEC who's really looking at this. It's not like you have a federal district judge who's ensuring that the parties adhere to timelines. There's nothing like that. It's basically just the SEC, the SEC, and the SEC all kind of in one room. And, it reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other. There needs to be some kind of oversight. There needs to be some attention to the process because here we had a whole year in 2022 where nothing was done. Normally they post their administrative actions on the website so that parties can follow along, and they do tend to follow what the regulations say. The regulations give timelines for when a proposed plan of distribution is to be submitted, for what happens if you don't have one ready in 60 days after you've received the funds. And the point of that is to give notice to the public so that they can comment on the proposed plan and say, we like it, we don't like it, we think you should change this, and so on. Well, when they settle the case immediately, it stays administrative. They got the lion's share of the funds very early on. We're not really sure what the delay could be. And that's kind of why we felt the Office of Inspector General might be appropriate party to this, because what delay could there really be? The complexity at that point is effectively out of the picture. And so we think this type of delay, while there's no bright lines, of course, because that's kind of the thing about administrative law, it touches every area of our lives. But whenever you go to try to hold the federal government accountable for blowing a deadline, every court's like, well, it's just their expertise. We can't really be too hard on them. We can't really be too insistent on them doing stuff in a timely fashion. And this is exactly the problem. So we need them to stick to their own rules.
Why do you believe that the SEC is delaying the payment process?
Oh, because we're private. We're not the government. We're just trying to get the government to work better. We are pretty good at getting money back for investors when we can find the right person to sue and we can bring him into court in the United States. Our court system, for all the criticisms, it does still work very well. And if you look at the rest of the world, it looks like it works extremely well. Especially looking at many countries around the world, creating a functioning legal system, let alone an efficient and competent one, is a monumental task. And we have that in the United States, and especially at the federal level. And so I think that in the FTX situation, the Mt. Gox situation, obviously FTX was colossal fraud by a sociopathic individual who needs to go to prison for a really, really long time and never, ever get out. And people suffered, and they will suffer. But that's now the work of the United States attorneys and the Department of Justice. And I have absolute faith that they will do a competent job in prosecuting SBF and getting the maximum recovery for folks. This guy, John Ray, seems like a competent guy. I'm sure he'll do a great job as well.
Do you think you'll have to go to court if the delay is prolonged?
There's really no mechanism for us to do that. We would be basically saying that they have, violated the Administrative Procedures Act, which we are kind of saying already, but the courts afford the administrative agencies great latitude in these matters. And so it's almost certain that there would be no bright line violation of administrative law, but that doesn't mean that the agency is functioning at a high level. It doesn't mean that the that it's meeting the standards that the public has for how federal administrative agencies should behave and should be responsive. For one thing, they should give information when asked by a relevant party instead of saying, we don't give information, and then when you write follow up, you get silence. And so it's this one-way street approach with the SEC that just makes the victims feel like they're the adversarial party. It makes people who lost money feel like the SEC is really just in it for themselves, which they really are. I mean, we know that investor protection is only one part of their mandate. It's not the whole mandate. And so it's unpopular, but we have to remember the SEC is an agency primarily of lawyers and accountants. And if you run the agency like a law firm or like an accounting firm, is a good chance it's not going to be as responsive as it should be, because lawyers don't feel like they have to be responsive to the public like that. Lawyers feel like, oh, just shut the door, I'm out at lunch. The SEC has the highest salary scale, pay scale that I'm aware of in the federal government, this SK scale, where, they have to compete with firms on Wall Street who might attract some of the same candidates. So they're very well compensated for the work they do, and they're also very slow. And so I don't know where that leaves you. It doesn't leave the public with a very positive impression of how hard you're working, I can tell you that.
Okay, and how does this case compare to cases like FTX or even Mt. Gox, for example?
FTX was a critical moment because it left egg on the face, not just of, obviously, it made SBF it unmasked him as the true evil character that he turned out to be. We're all waiting for the SBF redemption arc, right? You can imagine the section in the New York Times are going to do a nice big spread, I'm sure, one of these days when they decide that SBF has suffered enough. We all know it's coming. But I think that in that scenario, SBF, he did the political thing, and he caused us immeasurably more harm by embarrassing Ranking Member Waters, embarrassing Gary Gensler, embarrassing numerous high-placed people in the federal government, and some who are very close to the president. And so we have to understand that with that amount of egg on your face, it's no wonder that they are taking this type of tack toward crypto, because I don't think most of them truly understand the difference between what FTX is doing and what, for instance, the Ethereum community is doing on chain, and what the difference between these large centralized counterparties are and a lot of the more decentralized projects. So there's an information deficit. They're embarrassed. They already were predisposed to skepticism. And then whenever SBF was revealed to be a fraud, well, they looked pretty stupid. Mm-hmm. And it was stupid of them to get into bed with SBF. So that we now have to pay for their stupidity is kind of par for the course in American life. Whenever a 70-year-old with $100 million net worth does something stupid, it's automatically, everybody who's 45 and under's fault, I guess. And it's maddening that we have to really, do all this work now to pick up the pieces from the disaster SBF left behind. But we deserve that, because we did not police SBF any better than anyone else. Right. And and nor did we do anything about Mashinsky. These were obviously not business models that were going to work. The FTX looked like it was going to work because it was a functioning exchange. SBF didn't. That's why I initially thought FTX was legit, but I never thought Celsius was, because I just didn't think this endless paying of interest could possibly work. It was obviously a security-like product. There was moving parts in there that the public didn't understand. That's kind of what the securities laws are designed to protect people from. But then on the other hand, you have this very profitable functioning exchange, and you have a guy who just decided to throw a grenade in it for no obvious reason. So I don't know. I don't always understand people's motivations, because there's a level of disconnect between actual human beings that's troublesome. And I'm just a dude, I don't know. I don't have any great insight about human nature other than my own lived experience. And I can't for the life of me put myself in SBF's shoes. So sometimes we are surprised in the worst way.
Indeed, in the aftermath of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, the SEC decided to take a stronger stance in its crackdown on crypto companies in the country. From lawsuits against exchanges like Coinbase, Binance US, and Kraken, they can't seem to catch a break. Nevertheless, Matthew is optimistic about the future of the crypto space, claiming that he just wants the industry to get cleaned up and to succeed. Now let's talk about a more positive subject. Since I mentioned Coinbase, this exchange is on a mission to brighten up people's summers. To celebrate the launch of Base, its new network, it has been running a campaign aptly called Onchain Summer. Basically, it's a 3-week celebration showcasing the era of what they call on-chain utility. And it's been a week and a half so far after kicking off on August 9. The company heralds it as a celebration of art, music, and gaming. It features popular NFT artists and brands like Coca-Cola, as well as popular DAOs like Friends with Benefits and NounsDAO, which are participating in different activations. Coinbase is also collaborating with Prop House, an incubator linked to NFT project NounsDAO, to give out over 100 ETH, or $186,000 in grants for developers building on Base. They're also encouraging developers to enroll in the ETH Global Super Hack, an upcoming hackathon that will offer $175,000 in rewards. Additionally, users have been able to and can continue to score a different NFT every day for the remainder of the campaign. Sounds to me like Coinbase is just trying to boost the NFT market because, let's face it, NFTs are not having a hot girl summer. So perhaps this on-chain summer event can actually help bolster the token's trading volume. To further boost community engagement around Base, Coinbase is encouraging users to bridge their Ether to Base in order to mint a free NFT to commemorate the launch of the Base mainnet. Millions of free NFTs have been minted so far. This just means that people aren't trading as much as they used to, and that the value of a lot of NFTs, including blue chips, has dropped significantly. Of course, this is normal during a bear market when speculation is down. And personally, I think that once the bull run kicks in again, NFTs will likely be the last blockchain-based product to see a meaningful uptick again. Jesse Pollock, who heads up Base, recently told me that on-chain should be the term that replaces Web3 and even blockchain, because it might make more sense to people who already get this idea of online. It's a similar concept. And people might feel more comfortable saying on-chain rather than blockchain. He described on-chain to mean that you can access apps, art, or media that increase your economic freedom and make your life better.
Today's crypto market report. Bitcoin dipped to $25,000 this week and is currently at $26,000. Litecoin is down 12% in the last 24 hours with a price of $64. Ethereum currently stands at $1,600. And Optimism is up slightly with a price of $1.40.
That about wraps things up for today, so please remember to hit that like button and leave me a comment below. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.